Fairhaven United Methodist Church is 110 years old. It was put in this location in 1907. My name is Rich Cummings. I am the historian for the Fairhaven United Methodist Church, listed with the Pennsylvania Historic Museum Commission. Fairhaven was the center of it all. This was the center of the village. This is the last building from the coal mining village of Fairhaven. The fact that this church has survived as long as it has is a testament to the people over the last century. They were not wealthy people, they were coal miners. Coal miners were making 7 cents for every ton of coal they mined. In 1872, Jacob Hayes and Thomas Briggs decided to utilize the natural resources of this area and sell the coal that was under all the hills here. The town quickly developed. The little town of Fairhaven is what they named it. It became like an old West town. There were brothels, bars everywhere, people being shot in Fairhaven. Going to church on a Sunday wasn't always a viable option. Children worked in the fields, children worked in the mines. It was dangerous here. Its nickname was Hell's Hole, and it was truly that. When the Methodists came here, the Methodists came in the late 1870s. And what drew them here, of course, was the fact that this was like an old West town. The purpose of Methodism was, number one, to bring God's word to his people. Fairhaven was a good source because there was a lot of bad stuff going on. And the other thing that drew Methodists, which was really noble, and it's gotten lost over the years, is their desire to teach literacy skills to immigrants. And there was a lot of people here who needed that. The first Fairhaven church, and I should say that the Methodist church was called the Methodist Protestant Church in 1881 when this church was founded. The very first church was met at the Baldwin Township School, which was half a block from here. And they met in that building from 1881 to 1890. And in 1890, the Baldwin School District evicted them, essentially. When the church was evicted from that building, John Thompson donated a piece of property on Glenberry Street, and a one-room building was built there, made of wood. It was not ecumenical in any way. There was no crosses, no stained glass windows, just a wooden building. And the church met there, the congregation met there until 1907. And at that point, the building became very small for the amount of people who had to join the church. So they wanted to look for the trustees wanted to look for a new site to build a church. One of the church's founding members was Hannah Hibbs, and Hannah approached one of the wealthier people in the area, John Horning, and they donated the piece of property which this church sits on today. This was originally farmland, and they donated this property. The cornerstone was laid in June of 1907, and money was raised to build this building, get very nice stained glass windows for a church of this size, and for a congregation that was not very well to do. And so in 5 months, the church was dedicated on December 8th, 1907. They had finally achieved the goal of getting a permanent structure. This was the biggest building in the area, the tallest building, certainly the most elegant. It was the centerpiece. It was a crown jewel. It undoubtedly served as a marvel to little kids walking around who had never seen anything bigger than a one-room log cabin. In 1939, this church building was condemned, and church history says that it was condemned as a Pittsburgh building inspector was driving by and noticed that the entire building listed to port, which is always in quotation marks, so it must have been on the actual papers documentation. This makes sense because Fairhaven, Overbrook, as it was known then, was incorporated into the city of Pittsburgh by 1929. And so in 1939, there was a lot of construction, a lot of things going on. And so the arrival of building inspectors in this area would have been very commonplace. The inspector came in and he said that besides the fact that the foundation was listing, which makes sense once again because this church is poor, there was no footers. It is built on the land. And Saw Mill Run Creek floods every year, at least. So that was an issue. The other issue was that the heating was not sufficient for the size of the building. The building was heated by 3 coal stoves, at least each floor was. The building inspector also said that the walls were not strong enough to support the weight of the roof. I can't really speak to that, but what was done was poles were installed here in this room that go from east to west and hold the walls in place. All of these changes were made for a cost of about $10,000. $600 was actually spent on rebuilding the foundation, and that figure is in church records. But after all the renovations was done, they did a lot of interior design change work as well. The building passed the inspection and was all good to go for another, hopefully 100 years, right? With all of the building and modernization that goes on around this church, one of the church trustees and members' biggest fears is having this property acquired by eminent domain. And there was an attempt to get the church historic status in the 1980s. That was not successful. In 2012, I offered my services to the Board of Trustees to write a proposal to get historic recognition for this church from the city of Pittsburgh. The points that were made in our proposal was, number one, the church has historic ties to famous people in the area, coal mine owners, pastors, many people like that. The fact that our windows are attributed to the Rudy Brothers, which was a very famous stained glass window studio, was located in East Liberty. Very famous locally, and the artisans who worked there actually went on to Tiffany's in Boston. The third component of the proposal, and to me it was the one that was the most important, was that the development of coal mining towns is a Western Pennsylvania phenomenon. And because of that, and because this is the last surviving building of a coal mining town, that the recognition is very important because it signifies the life and livelihood of the natives of this area of the country. The other piece of the proposal, which was a critical piece and had to be maintained, was the notion of historic integrity. The building had to be over 50 years old, but that any changes made to the building did not damage the integrity of the original structure. This church had an addition put on in 1939, an addition of a kitchen. It is also has aluminum siding on it. These two changes to the church did not affect the historic integrity because they were characteristic of the times in which they were done, concrete block, aluminum siding, and also that they reflected the ethnicity and the character. And ultimately, we had the Pittsburgh Planning Commission and the Historic Review Commission and City Council ultimately approved our proposal unanimously, all three bodies.